Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for coming to the 2018 Insurance Rollout webinar. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. We're waiting on a few more people, but we'll make sure that we get this going in a timely manner. In the meantime, if any of you could raise your hand just so I know that I'm not speaking into a black hole, that would be super helpful. Oh, there. Oh, wow. So many of you. Thank you. All right. I'm going back to mute now. We'll be back in just a couple minutes. Thank you. All right, I'm back. It looks like we have just about everyone that we're going to have, so thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kevin Deckinga, Membership Director with the League. You are on the 2018 Club and Advocacy Organization Insurance Rollout Call. So thank you so much for being here. Here we go. That's me. That's my oldest. And I am pleased to be on the call with Gina Doyle, Renee Watterson, and Rochelle Stearns from American Specialty Insurance. They're the dream team of cycling insurance. Can I say that? Does that date me? Maybe you want to say hi?
Hello. Hi. We're happy to be here, and you'll hear a lot from us here in just a little bit.
Yeah, I will keep my bit as quick as possible, but I just wanted to jump on and say thank you so much for being a part of the League. Yeah, that's right, member supported since 1880, and you're all a part of it, that enduring legacy of bike advocacy, and it's certainly changed over time. We're not advocating for paved roads like we used to, maybe in some places. But the strategies and the ends and the means and the tactics have all changed. But your support has been undying, and we really appreciate that. If you are curious whether or not you are a member of the League, you can find out quickly and easily by visiting bikeleague.org/renew, and you can enter your name or email or address. There's a bunch of parameters that you can choose, and it will tell you if your membership is in good standing. Many of you are individual members as well as organizational members, so double thanks. We really, really sincerely appreciate it. Very, very quickly, I will go through just a few things for you. We're rolling out a couple new membership benefits for advocacy organizations and for clubs. This applies to both clubs and advocacy groups. Advocacy alerts. We've signed on with a new platform called Phone to Action, and you've probably seen a tool like this. It uses email and a web presence and social media to activate your community and send messages to lawmakers. After an extensive search, we have signed on with Phone to Action, who we have decided, well, our opinion is that they're the best ones. I mean, quite frankly, we've been with a few over the years, and Phone to Action is so sharp looking, so easy to share, and really every campaign that we've done in the few months that we've been with them has gone viral. The screenshot that you're looking at here is a partnership we did with the New Jersey Bike and Walk Coalition and the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia. And this was a driver education law, and we won collectively, and Governor Christie signed it in New Jersey. And we're seeing wins like this all over the country. So if your group is interested in using our tool, we will of course share contacts. Everything will be completely open. It'd be a good way to boost your contact numbers, get messages to lawmakers. You can do this for U.S. Senate or House, as well as state House and state reps, all the way down to the city and the ward level. So it's really, really neat. If you're interested, talk to me. For clubs, we have some great programming at the National Bike Summit coming up the first week of March, including management and leadership best practices, mitigating risk with our friends at American Specialty Insurance, and group riding training. In years past, we've put a lot of pressure on the 100% club program, where clubs can pledge to make 100% of their followers members of the league. We still do that, but we want to offer another incentive to those who might not want to pledge 100% support, but we're willing to offer you discount codes for $15 off league membership. It's a great way to connect your members to national advocacy. All of their members will see a complimentary subscription to Bicycling Magazine, and they'll get great benefits like discounted registration for the summit and deals on bikes, tours, and gear. And our list of member discount partners keeps growing and growing for individuals. This year we signed deals with Diamondback Bikes, Raleigh, Pocampo Bags, tours in places like New Orleans and the French Alps. I mean, we're really doing our best to add new benefits for membership, and again, that's for individual members. For Advocacy Orgs, you have probably heard us ramble on about the Active Transportation Leadership Institute. It is rolling along. Details about it can be found on the Hub, our new peer learning space, and really the gathering point for the Leadership Institute. Here's a screenshot of what that Hub looks like. Hey, look, I posted about the insurance webinar. Yeah, some great, learn best practices from like groups and peers in this industry. Finally, You've probably heard us talk about the leadership retreat. It's happening this Saturday and Sunday before the National Bike Summit, March 3rd and 4th. You don't have to register for the summit to go to the leadership retreat. It'll be a great opportunity to come to DC when it's semi-warm and meet your peers in advocacy in person and share best practices. And it will be guided by some of the best people in bike advocacy. So give it some thought. Again, any questions at all, talk to me. That's all I've got. I am going to ask Gina and Renee and Rochelle to take the reins from me, please, before I talk for an hour, and we'll get rolling. If you have any questions during the webinar, please use that chat box, and then we'll do a bit of a Q&A afterward. But finally, thank you all so much for being here. This is being recorded, so if you need a refresher or need to share with your club board after the fact, it's there, but we're always here. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kevin. Let me just give me 1 second here to get things switched over.
All right, we see something. Here we go. Great.
All right, success. Welcome, everyone. Like Kevin said earlier, I'm here. This is Gina Doyle, and I'm here with Renee Watterson. If you have participated in the LAB Club insurance program for 1, 5, 10, 25 years, you probably spoke to Renee at some time or another. I always give her a hard time because every time I am in front of a group of league members, they are always, the first question is, where is Renee? Where is Renee? So we get so much, she has so much interaction with all of you, so you'll have an opportunity to hear from her tonight. And I'm also here with Rochelle Stearns. And just a little bit of background, if you're new to the League Insurance Program or are considering the program, we have been a partner of the League for about 26 years and value that partnership very much. We look forward to seeing many of you at the summit in March. We'll be there to answer questions, just to be able to connect in person, and also we'll have a couple of sessions. So hope to be able to talk to you all in person, and we're always available by email or phone. So we will go ahead and get started here. The purpose of our presentation tonight is really just to give an overview of the League Insurance Program, also give you an idea of rates and premium for 2018, answer any questions that you might have, time permitting, and also just explain any differences in coverage from expiring to renewal. So you might ask the question, why the LAB Club Insurance Program? Why should I choose this program over any other insurance program that's out there? And after 25 years of working with the League, we've really developed in connection and collaborating with the League a specialized insurance program that really meets the unique needs of a bicycle club. If you look at some of the extensions and expansions that have been added over the years, it's not something that you will find automatically or may even be able to secure if you were to go to a local broker or another entity and look for the same coverage. Another important factor is the experienced claims specialist with over 25 years working with the LAB and its club. One thing that I get so excited about here at American Specialty is that the individual, if you had a claim 20 years ago that handled your claim, is probably still here. Many of us have been here for a lot of years, and like I said before, developed a lot of great relationships with a lot of the clubs. And hopefully you don't need the claims specialist and you don't have a claim, but in the event that you do, you certainly want someone who is familiar with your business and the unique exposures of your organization. a customized insurance purchasing platform with access to American Specialties team if the online platform is not your preference. So if you're currently in the program, you know that you can do almost everything start to finish, including issuing certificates of insurance online without having to pick up the phone. However, if your preference is to walk through that with someone on the phone, that's where many of you have spoke to Renee over the years, and we're here and available. Group purchasing power is really important, and it's something that all of the clubs who participate in the insurance program really benefit from. If you were to go on your own, let's say that you've had a loss. We've had losses over the years, and we've talked about those in the past, but let's say that you've had a large loss and you want to secure the same level of coverage with the same unique coverages. You might have difficulty securing that information or coverage on your own, but pooled together with all of your colleagues, you have a lot more purchasing power and leverage to be able to negotiate and secure coverage, again, for those unique exposures. And consistency in coverage, which is really important. You want to make sure that the coverage that you have, includes coverage for claims from the participants, and you want to make sure that that is the case year after year. It's easier to sometimes forget a coverage or omit a coverage, either intentionally or unintentionally, if you're changing from year to year. So the consistency in coverage really benefits the clubs in terms of being able to feel comfortable with the coverages that you have. So with the League Insurance Program, who's eligible for coverage? Continues to be available for any nonprofit who is a current member of the League and whose primary purpose is to promote and organize bicycling activities. The entity does not have to be incorporated or have tax-exempt status, which is a question that we receive on occasion, so that is not a requirement of coverage. And one note is that entities who are primarily engaged in mountain biking activities are not eligible for coverage. And we'll talk a little bit about what primarily means when we get to mountain biking activities. But for the most part, we've really structured the program so that any club who is a member of the LAB should qualify for coverage under the insurance program. Just quickly, and we're going to go through these coverages in detail, so I'm just going to briefly kind of outline what coverages we'll be talking about tonight. We'll be talking about the base program, which includes general liability and excess accident medical coverage, and then there's some optional coverages that are purchased separately, including excess liability, directors and officers liability. I know that we have a question from one of the participants about asking for an explanation of directors and officers liability, so we'll certainly do that when we get to that part in the presentation. Optional non-owned and hired automobile liability coverage, limited property coverage. We're really not set up to offer on a straightforward, as easy as the rest of the insurance program, workers' compensation or owned automobile liability coverage. So if your club owns an automobile and you need coverage for that vehicle. Just another quick note, which we'll talk about later in the presentation as well, LCIs are automatically covered under the general liability policy for their individual educational activities that are conducted in accordance with the League guidelines.
If I can add a quick thing to that, if you are a trained LCI, make sure that you are up to date on your League membership and LCI dues to continue that coverage. And you can find out if you are a member, of course, by visiting bikeleague.org/renew and plugging in your LCI number. And see me if you don't remember it. Yeah, happy to help.
Great, thank you for that. For the purposes of the insurance program, we really differentiate between two types of clubs, a bicycle club and an advocacy organization. Bicycle clubs and advocacy organizations receive the same liability insurance coverage, but pay for it a little differently, and we'll go into detail on that. An advocacy organization pays a flat premium to join. The program is not based on the number of members in your advocacy organization. In order to meet the definition of advocacy organization, again, from an insurance perspective, the advocacy organization has to have 26 or fewer club rides. Maybe you don't have any club rides, but you can't have more than 26 club rides annually with an average of 50 or fewer riders. If you have more rides, then you must enroll as a bicycle club. And a bicycle club, that premium, or for the purpose of insurance, is based on the number of members in your program or in your club. So we'll talk again a little bit about how that premium is paid, but just for the purposes of the presentation, when I'm referring to bicycle club, I'm talking about those membership-based organizations that have 26 or greater than 26 rides. In advocacy organizations, I'm referring to organizations who have 26 or fewer club rides. So the first coverage that we're going to talk about is the general liability coverage. While many of the other coverages like excess accident medical are very important, especially if one of your members is injured, the general liability policy, in my opinion, is one of the most important, because it's the coverage and the policy that allows you to continue operations in the event of a liability claim or liability lawsuit. So general liability coverage protects your club from liability claims of bodily injury, property damage, and personal and advertising injury. Some examples of claims that we've had: bodily injury claims. A cyclist struck a person walking on a trail, and that individual brings suit against the league or the club. Cyclist fell due to road conditions and brought a claim or suit against the club. Or cyclist was struck by a vehicle. So these are all examples of something that has gone wrong during an advocacy or a club activity, and the individual who was injured brings suit against or makes a claim against the club. They may claim that road conditions were not appropriate, or that the club failed to keep people off of a trail. And you might think, I know my members in my club, and I don't think they'll bring suit against my club, but it's really hard to know what any one of us would do in the event of a really catastrophic injury. So that's why I say, again, this is probably one of the most important coverages that the league offers. Property damage liability is going to be liability arising from property damage by the club. So an example would be a cyclist struck and damaged a vehicle during a club ride. This property damage liability is not coverage for your club's owned property. That is an optional coverage that you would need to talk to us about separately. This, again, is liability in the event that you or your club is named in a lawsuit. Sports equipment liability, bicycle stolen from a club's bicycle corral. That would be another example. For general liability coverage, and talking about who it covers, the general liability policy provides coverage for covered activities. Covered activities include for all covered activities. And in order for coverage to apply, the league, bicycle club, and advocacy organization must have enrolled and paid the appropriate premium. Members and volunteers of the insured clubs are insured under the policy. Directors, officers, and employees of the insured clubs are covered under the policy as well. Again, directors and officers and employees under the general liability policy are covered for claims of bodily injury, property damage, and personal and advertising injury claims. Also, first-time invited guests are covered for covered rides only. This is the slide that we talk about what activities are covered. Club rides, recreational bicycle rides conducted and supervised by an insured club for which no fee is charged. Again, this applies for both bike clubs and advocacy organizations. One thing to note with advocacy organizations is that this coverage only applies if, when you are purchasing the coverage, you indicate that you conduct rides and have fewer than the 26 rides. So on the online application, you'll have an option to say, I'm an advocacy organization and I either have bike rides or I do not have bike rides. If I do have bike rides, I have less than 26. So if you say, for example, when you're signing up for coverage that you're an advocacy organization and you do not have club rides, and we get a claim from your club arising from a club ride, that's not something that's going to be covered. So it's just really important to make sure as you're answering those questions that you're you're answering them to the best of your ability. Special events are defined as recreational bicycle rides conducted and supervised by an insured club for which a participation fee is charged. Special events have to be reported prior to the event, and the appropriate premium is paid after the event. So once you purchase coverage and you're going to have a special event, then you'll go online and what we call schedule the event. After the event is over, you have 14 days.
We want you to pay within 2 weeks after the event has occurred.
Okay. Within 2 weeks after the event, we ask that you go back on and put in the actual number of participants and pay the premium attributable to that event. Yeah, and Renee is pointing out that for a bicycle club, you don't have to count your members for which you've already paid. So even if your members are participating in the special event and there's a fee charged for their participation, you do not have to account for them when you go in and schedule the event. Bicycle-related activities such as club meetings, fundraisers, time trials, bike education courses, again, that applies as long as you've indicated in the online platform that you have educational courses as part of your club program. Bike refurbishment, again, so long as you've indicated that you offer bike refurbishment. So again, the policy is really designed to provide coverage for your business operations as a bike club in an advocacy organization, but the online platform of purchasing coverage helps us identify the exposures so that the proper and appropriate premium can be applied. The limit of liability on the general liability policy is $1 million each occurrence. Like I said earlier, one of the optional coverages is excess liability coverage. If you're interested in that coverage, you need to reach out to Renee. We have a couple different approaches where we can provide additional limits for you. And then a $5 million general aggregate. And the difference between an each occurrence and a general aggregate is that the policy will not pay any more than $1 million for any one claim. And that is not including defense costs. So defense costs are in addition to the limit of liability. And then the policy itself will not pay more than five $1 million occurrences because you have a $5 million general aggregate. So as an example, if your club has a claim and there's $1 million settlement or $1 million verdict against your club, the policy will pay the $1 million. If you have a $1.5 million verdict against your club and you haven't purchased excess liability coverage, this policy will still only pay $1 million for that one claim. Using the same scenario, if you have two separate incidents on let's say two separate days and both result in $1 million claim, the policy, because it has a $5 million general aggregate, will pay $1 million for each one of those claims up to the $5 million limit, which applies for each insured individually. So your club has its own $5 million aggregate. Using, again, that same scenario, if you have two $1.5 million claims in one policy period, the policy will pay $1 million for the first claim and $1 million for the second claim. But that additional $1 million, the 500 from each claim, would not be covered unless you have excess liability coverage. I had mentioned that defense costs are in addition to the limit of liability, which is a huge benefit of a general liability policy. What that means is that even though there's $1 million occurrence, if you have $1 million verdict plus a $500,000 in defense costs to pay the attorney who helped you get to that point, the policy will pay for the defense costs in addition to the $1 million limit. And we've talked about the sports equipment liability, the $5,000 subject to a $1,500 deductible. A couple of important items to know with respect to the general liability policy is that release of liability waivers are recommended as a method to protect your club. We do recommend them. It's not a requirement at this particular time, with the exception of mountain biking, which we'll talk about in a minute. Waivers have proved to be very helpful. You might wonder, well, I get all of these release liability waivers, but then you're telling me that I continue, we're continue to be at risk of paying the $1 million or the $2 million verdicts. I can tell you that from a defense perspective, they are very, very helpful. There are some states where they're not as effective in other states, but it still gives us something to talk about. So from our perspective, it's still worth a lot of work that I know it is for you all to continue to collect those if you're already doing so. And if you're not and you're considering it, we again would recommend it. Recommend helmets just purely from an insurance risk management perspective. You might recall that in 2017 we heard the feedback that you provided on sometimes we have a non-competitive walking component to our club rides, and so we were able to expand the policy to not only provide coverage for bike activities but also walking events. A couple of things to keep in mind with walking events is that it is in conjunction with a club ride. So the idea is that you all meet at the same place, you all go the same route, or maybe the walkers have a little bit of a different route, but it's not that on Tuesday our walkers meet and on Thursday our cyclists meet and we participate in our club activities. It's designed to be in conjunction with a club ride. We do offer limited abuse and molestation coverage. It's automatically provided up to $25,000. That limit is really designed to help hopefully provide you with a defense to kind of investigate and hopefully have your club removed from any litigation or claims involving abuse and molestation. I wanted to talk a little bit more about mountain biking. So when we, last year, we did add a component to the club insurance program that allowed mountain biking activities to be covered under the policy. Historically, it was a little bit more gray where it could be covered or maybe it's not covered. And so we really spent a lot of time kind of focusing on what the exposure is and narrowing in on that. Initially, we started out with if you would be eligible for this coverage if you had three or fewer annual mountain biking activities. And the feedback that we received from all of you was that, I'm not a mountain biking club, but I certainly might have more than 3 mountain biking activities in any one year. So that has been increased to 52 club rides or less, with the idea that we're not really in the business, American Specialty, of providing coverage for mountain biking clubs. But we know that our cycling clubs might have a mountain biking component. The idea being that, once a week is where we felt, at a max is where we felt most comfortable. There are some requirements with mountain biking activities. One, if you have the exposure and you want coverage, you have to purchase the coverage, and that's a question on the online purchasing platform. Helmets and a release liability waiver are required for mountain biking activities. You might recall, as I just said, that helmets and release liability waivers are recommended for all other club activities, but required for mountain biking activities. Mountain biking may not represent more than a third of the club's annual activities, and we provided some examples of what type of mountain biking activities we're considering here. If for some reason you do not meet that criteria, but you offer mountain biking, you need to reach out to Renee so that we can talk through, is that something that we can cover, or next steps for your club. So again, if you have mountain biking, you need to be able to meet that criteria. If not, let's say that you have 100 club rides a year, you need to reach out to Renee and we'll talk through it and see if it's something that we can add on a one-off basis. A couple of notes on what is not covered. We've been talking about what is covered, and our intent is really to be broad in what's covered, but there are some activities that we do not intend to cover under this policy, and that includes racing, for-profit tours, rentals or bike share programs, commercial bike or repair shops, construction or engineering of bike trails, year-round bike depot exposures, certain alcohol-related exposures, and organizers and supervising walking, biking school bus. So I can tell you, while the league's insurance program does not cover this, and that is by design from an insurance perspective, we can sometimes look at these exposures on a one-off basis and put something specific and outside of the league's insurance program in place for you if you have some of these exposures. Just real quick on the losses, just wanted to point out, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, that the league is really, from a loss perspective, more of a low frequency, high severity risk, where we might have crashes that happen frequently, hopefully not, but we might. However, those that result in an actual claim, that frequency is pretty low, which is good. That's really good for the league. When you look at the number of people and the number of rides that take place every day, really, across the U.S. and that are covered under this program. But we've also learned that the severity is very high. We have a lot of very, from a loss perspective, catastrophic claims where large amounts of money, unfortunately, have been paid out as a result of these crashes or injuries that do take place. Bodily injury claims, as you would assume, represent the greatest exposure. Those are the examples that I gave you of the bodily injury type claims. We do have a few property damage liability claims, but to date, they really represent a relatively small percentage of overall losses. So again, our biggest exposure area is going to be the bodily injury claims, which you would really expect for any sports organization, and especially cycling, where sometimes we can't control all of the risk elements. The next coverage that I wanted to talk about is the excess accident medical policy. This policy provides excess medical coverage for accidental injuries that occur during a covered activity. It also includes accidental death and dismemberment. So again, the individuals who are covered under this policy are going to be members of insured clubs and first-time invited guests, and coverage is going to apply during club rides and time trials conducted and supervised by an insured club. For advocacy organizations, again, this is only if you've indicated that you do conduct rides. You also have coverage for your club rides as long as it falls within that criteria of 26 or fewer. Registered participants and volunteers during special events also have access to this coverage, and all attendees of bicycle education courses organized by an insured club also have coverage, assuming, again, that such was disclosed and the proper premium was paid for that exposure. The limit, the accident medical limit, is $10,000 per person per accident. Again, it's an excess accident medical coverage, which is really designed to help offset the out-of-pocket expenses that your members might incur as a result of an injury during one of your club rides. There's a $500 disappearing deductible, which means that if through my employer I have a $1,000 deductible and I've paid that $1,000 deductible, I do not have to turn around and pay the league's insurance company an additional $500. We consider that deductible net. Excess over any other valid and collectible insurance, which includes your medical insurance or Medicare, Medicaid, whatever may be available. There's a $5,000 accidental death and dismemberment benefit in the unfortunate event that we need to utilize that coverage. Just real quick on the losses, the injuries range, again, anywhere from minor injuries to catastrophic. We have had a fatality or two under the program, so that death benefit has been paid out before. One thing that we're really watching is the number of claimants who have other insurance. And the reason that's important is because this policy, again, is really designed to be excess over any other valid and collectible insurance. One thing that really impacts excess accident medical coverage is as individuals or employees take on higher deductible plans, that sometimes can have an effect on the excess accident medical coverage where you might not have been paying as soon as you are today. So we continue to monitor how many claimants have other insurance. Our average payment on claims is somewhere between $1,700 and $2,000 per claim. So that gives us a pretty good idea on what we're seeing. We're not seeing a lot of folks, which again, we have 94% who have other insurance, but we're not seeing a lot of folks who don't have primary insurance or that have those really, really high deductibles where we would go through the entire $10,000 limit. The other thing it could be saying is that we're seeing minor injuries, more minor injuries, which if we're going to have any injuries at all, we certainly want them to be minor. So that is very positive. So that is really the core. The general liability and the participant accident or the excess accident medical coverage is really the core of the league insurance program. So before we get into the optional coverages, I wanted to spend some time talking about how to purchase the coverage. The process is similar, if not the same, to the way it has been in the past, which is helpful. The website is americanspecialty.com/LAB. We did send an alert on Friday, so we know many of you have gone online and renewed your coverage or at least viewed that email. So if you're new to the program, you can feel free to visit that website. You can get a quote without actually having to purchase coverage if you're wanting to look through it and see what it's about. Again, premium for coverage other than special event premium is paid after the event takes place. And again, a special event is an event where a fee is charged to the participants to participate in the event. Premium for all other coverage, so more your annual operations coverage, is paid for at the time of enrollment. You need to register special events online. Coverage begins at the time of payment or February 1st, 2018, whichever is first, right? And ends on February 1st, 2019. So it is annual coverage. Discounts do apply if you purchase coverage after 2018, but again, the full minimum premium applies. So with the policy really being designed to provide coverage for your annual operations, that's why the coverage expires altogether on February 1st, 2019. You can secure certificates of insurance for your special events directly online, which is consistent with the past. We need to talk about the program cost. And so we'll just go through these, and at the end we have a quick summary that will help, I think, outline the difference in premium. For club activities, again, for bicycle clubs, those are the clubs who have greater than 26 rides, and their premiums range from $4.63 per member to $3.64 per member, with a discount being applied as the number of participants in your club or members in your club increases. Coverage is subject to a minimum premium, so if you have 5 members in your club, then we might want to talk a little bit about, does it make sense to move to an advocacy organization? But we have to be careful of that because of the number of rides. But those are things where Renee is really good at being able to help the clubs talk through that. Number of club members equals the peak of your club activities. Advocacy organizations, again, are those organizations with 26 or fewer rides in any one year. If you're an advocacy organization that does not have club or social rides, the annual premium is $143. So when I look at that, I really look at it as that's $143 for $1 million of coverage with a $5 million aggregate. So it's a lot of money, I know, for a lot of advocacy organizations, but it's also, when you compare it to the limit that you're getting, I think a very, very good example of group purchasing power. Because you do not have club or social rides, the participant accident or excess accident medical coverage is not provided for the advocacy organizations who indicate that they don't have any rides. If you are an advocacy organization who has 26 or fewer rides with less than 50 on average riders in each ride, the annual premium, again, for that same limit is $238. The difference in premium is the fact that if you're not having rides, you don't really need to be charged for the excess accident medical coverage because it's never going to be utilized. But if you do have rides, you want to be able to have that coverage available for your club members. There's a couple of add-ons to the liability cost. If you have an office that you lease year-round or rent year-round, you can add coverage for that exposure. And again, if you combine this with what you are paying for that annual coverage, I think it's very competitive. If you're offering education courses, you'll see that if you're using only LCIs as instructors, you get a little bit of a discount compared to using non-LCIs as instructors. So if you're doing classroom only, using only LCIs as instructors, that annual premium is $75. If you're doing classroom only, but you're not able to use all LCI instructors, there's a $25 increase in that premium. Classroom and on-bike instruction, again, if you're using all LCIs as instructors, that premium is $217 per year. And if you're not able to use all LCI instructors, it's $289 a year. So you can probably see that the difference between offering the coverage or purchasing the coverage for classroom only compared to classroom and on bike, the exposure is obviously greater if we're doing on bike instruction, but is really important, obviously. So that's why you see a difference in premium there. Bicycle refurbishment, if you have, if your club is, or your advocacy organization is taking bikes in and refurbishing them and selling them or giving them away, you can add coverage for that exposure. So when I look at that at $144, and I think about the fact that a club really is assuming quite a bit of exposure by taking in a bike and fixing it up and giving it to someone else, because if that someone else rides off on the bike and it falls apart and the individual is injured, there's a good chance, especially if that individual is not a member of your club, that they're going to be looking to you for medical expenses or a liability type claim. Mountain biking, we've already talked about that, but that is another optional coverage. Your special event premium, again, there's a discount based on the number of participants that are in your special event. One thing to remember, which I indicated earlier, but I felt like it was a little choppy when I was explaining it, is that bicycle clubs do not count the members when reporting special event participation. So if you have 100 of your club members participating in your special event and you have a total of 500 participants in your special event, you're not going to count those 100 members who are participating because you've already accounted for them under your annual club insurance premium. I know that it's difficult sometimes to increase the cost, but one thing that I look at with the special event premium here is that you have the rates. And what makes an event a special event is that we're charging a fee. So the reason we break it out like this for you is theoretically so that you could just increase the cost to the participants who are participating in the event. I know it's not easy to increase costs for participation, but if we look at it as, $5 additional and you're contributing $5 to the insurance, and then whatever else you're charging for the event itself, that is hopefully, when we show it this way, helps you be able to budget accordingly for your special events. So those are the coverages, like I said, the core coverages. We want to talk a little bit about optional coverages, and I apologize, the rate change summary, I had them mixed up on my screen. So I want to do, before we go into the optional coverages here, let's talk about the rate change summary. This is just a snapshot that I said I would provide, at the beginning of talking about all of those rates. And this, I think, is a little more straightforward. Our club rates, again, all of these rates are based on the first 1,000 members or riders, with the idea that the cost goes down if the number of members increases. So this is, if you will, worst case scenario in terms of rates. The club rates are $4.63 per member, which is about a 47-cent per member increase. Advocacy organizations, if you have those 26 or fewer rides, your premium year over year is going to increase by $23. And that's for the straight general liability coverage without any add-ons. Your advocacy organizations, if you're not having rides, your premium, a slight increase of $13 annual. Special events, I talked about there, you were at about a 50-cent per rider increase, or $5.04 per rider, and hopefully that, especially with special events, hopefully can be passed on to your participants. And then the annual administrative fee, which is designed, or is for the overall development, ongoing maintenance, and all of the work that the league puts into having this competitive, thorough program, is going to remain the same. So now we'll talk about the optional coverages. The first is the non-owned and hired automobile liability coverage. So under a general liability policy, it provides coverage for, like I said, all of those bodily injury claims, property damage liability claims. But in every general liability policy, there's an exclusion for losses occurring as a result of the use of an automobile. And so that's why we all need automobile liability coverage, whether it's in our personal lives, if we have an auto, or as a business or organization. An overview of this coverage is that if you're named in a lawsuit as a result of the use of a vehicle, maybe it is your, if you have an employee driving, running an errand, going to the post office, maybe it is a lag vehicle in one of your special events, maybe it is everybody driving together to a fundraising event. Any type of automobile exposure where we're driving on behalf of the club is where this coverage comes into play. This is not automatically provided. If you're interested in this coverage, you need to reach out to Renee Watterson or another member of our team, and we will help you secure this coverage. And the limit that we're offering is the $1 million per occurrence. So this is a policy that I really recommend for most clubs. It really does depend on your individual exposures, but if we all sit and think about whether or not we ever drive on behalf of the club, I think that many of us would say that yes, at some point in time we're driving on behalf of the club, which means that if the club is named in a lawsuit as a result of that driving on behalf of the club and you haven't purchased this coverage, then the club doesn't have coverage. It's an uninsured loss, if you will. Now the driver may have coverage, but that coverage isn't going to extend to the club as an entity. Directors and officers liability coverage, like automobile liability coverage, directors and officers, or the general liability policy, again, provides coverage for bodily injury, property damage, and personal and advertising injury, but it does not provide coverage, and there's an exclusion on all general liability policies for the wrongful acts. So something, wrongful act meaning discrimination, or meaning a decision that the club makes or that the club's board makes, taking the advocacy organization or the bike club in one direction over the other. So that, because there's not a bodily injury claim, falls to the directors and officers liability policy. A couple of examples of directors and officers liability claims for a club would be, let's say that you become aware of the fact that one of your members was arrested for abuse and molestation, and you have family events that your club organizes, and you decide that you don't want that individual to be a member of the organization, and the board or the club itself takes action to prevent that from happening, and the individual feels that they were discriminated against and brings suit against the club or your individual board members or your volunteers or employees of the club, which are all covered under directors and officers liability policy for wrongful acts. Another example would be, as an advocacy organization, you have someone who donates or you use a grant and someone alleges that the grant was used inappropriately or that the money was used in a manner other than what they intended it to be, and as a result they are going to bring suit against the club or the individuals who made that decision. Those are some examples of directors and officers liability coverage. You can purchase directors and officers liability coverage on the insurance purchasing website that's specific for and designed especially for the league. There's two limit options. There's $1 million limit and a $2 million limit. I know that many of our clubs who are on this call already purchased the coverage, and if you have any questions, I know that there was a specific question about explaining what it does and the difference between general liability and directors and officers liability. I would love to talk offline with you about that. Retentions, which is another word for deductible, the directors and officers liability, $500 for directors and officers and $1,000 for employment practices. And you might ask, why do I need employment practices coverage? Well, in the insurance industry, employment practices is going to be any discrimination or employment type claim. So that club member who says you discriminated against them, even though they're not an employee, that's going to fall to the employment practices section of the directors and officers liability policy. Oh, here's the purchasing website for the directors and officers liability coverage. This coverage begins the day that coverage is purchased and expires on February 1st, 2019. It's a little bit different, excuse me, than the general liability policy or base program because it provides coverage or coverage is prorated starting February 2nd, 2018. So if you go in to purchase coverage and you said, oh, well, the American Specialty Team said that the cost would be $550 plus the $25 purchasing group fee that the insurance company charges, but it's only $350, is because of the timing. So the idea would be to be able to provide that first year if you don't purchase it annually, if you haven't, on a short-term basis, so that then you can turn around and have an annual policy. Real quick on LCI and seminar coaches, I had alluded to the fact that the general liability policy automatically provides coverage for these individuals, and it applies during smart cycling seminars and classes conducted in accordance with the league's procedures. So you don't have to reach out to us to confirm coverage. You really need to, you're always welcome to. We're always happy to talk to you. But really, in order to confirm that you have coverage, you need to refer back to what Kevin said earlier in terms of checking that you are a valid member and that your membership dues are current. Did I miss anything there, Kevin?
No, you got it. Thank you.
Okay. And in the event that you need proof of insurance, maybe a facility that you're going into, or a business that you're going into wants to know that you have coverage, you can certainly request that information from American Specialty. And if you don't know by now, every time I say American Specialty, I really mean Renee. So I should use this opportunity to give you Renee's contact information along with mine. And I don't have Rochelle's information on here. How'd you get so lucky, Rochelle? But another member of our team who is not here with us tonight, but if you've been in the league program for long, that you've talked to probably, is Christy Imschweiler. So a great alternative to Renee or I or Rochelle if you do run into any questions. So I know that we wanted to be able to do some questions and answers. We are right at 8 o'clock. And what I will do, Kevin, do you want me to try to go ahead and go through some of these?
Yeah, that would be great. There are a lot of really good questions here, so if we don't get to your question, please email Renee. Sorry, Renee. There are some really good ones. In addition to their contact information, I am always here for your league questions, membership, policy, programming, or otherwise. I'm Kevin at bikeleague.org.
Great. So I am going to have Renee answer the first question, which is, can you just kind of in your words, because I kind of jumbled around it, provide a definition of club ride under the insurance policy?
Well, typically our understanding of a club ride is that you would have a club ride leader assigned to that ride, just someone that can maybe give a brief overview of the course that's being taken, maybe even hand out a course map, and maybe try to verify if you have guests on the ride and then obtain a waiver from those guests. It's a ride that's, typically they're scheduled weekly, and there is no fee for the ride. So it's just your standard, weekly scheduled club rides.
Great. And then I'll take the next one, and then Renee and I will probably go back and forth. One question is that someone had asked, do we have a recommendation on background checks and for paid or unpaid staff at clinics or youth programs? I have a list of vendors who offer background checks at a fairly reasonable price to sports organizations, and it's something that I can make available. I will share it with Kevin, and we can share it as a resource. We don't recommend one or the other over the other, but it would definitely be a good starting point for anyone who's interested in doing background checks. One other question, which I think is a good question, is if they're all good questions, I shouldn't say that. If a covered club member rides in an advocacy group special event, must the advocacy group include the club rider in the participant count for computing premium payment? And the answer to that is yes, because the premium is really is from the organization who's putting on the event. So the advocacy organization isn't charged by member, and therefore we really haven't taken into account any special events there. So you would need to cover the club member, or include the club member in your advocacy organization's total count of participants for a special event.
Yeah. There's a question on here, are members and non-members covered if they are volunteering during a trail day cleanup event? We consider light trail work a covered activity under the general liability policy. Members would be covered, and then non-members would be covered as long as they're acting under the direction of the club. So if they're volunteering on behalf of the club and under the direction, the general liability policy would apply. It's important to know that there would not be any accident medical coverage if someone was injured during that trail maintenance cleanup.
Yep. Somebody asked for clarification on as long as the event is free, we don't have to inform you before the ride. So that is correct. If you are a bike club or an advocacy organization who's indicated that you have 26 or fewer rides, and where you are in your annual count is less than 26, you do not need to notify us if it's free, if it's not a special event. So those weekly bike club rides, you do not need to let us know. The club activity lasting 2 days. So there was a question on if we have a club activity that lasts 2 days, do we have to pay the special event premium for each day? So a couple of things for clarification purposes on this question is that you don't pay for activities unless you're charging a fee. So if you've signed up as a bike club and you've paid your annual per member premium, you don't have to then go in for each activity and schedule it unless you're charging a fee for that particular activity, so for that bike ride. So if you have a special event that lasts more than 1 day, we might want to talk about it from a risk management perspective just so that we understand what it is, but that special event is you charge for one special event premium. You don't pay the $464 each day. I'm sorry, the $504 each day per member. We had a question on, just again for clarification, if I'm an advocacy organization and I also offer education courses, do I pay both my basic premium for that annual coverage plus the fee for education course? And the answer to that is yes. So your base premium is kind of the starting point, and then if you have any of those ancillary activities, bike refurbishment or education, then you add on to that annual premium that you're already paying. So there's a question on excess limits. What type of additional limits are available and how much is it? It really will depend on the size of your club. I will tell you that probably for $1 million, if you were looking at a standalone policy, you're probably going to be at least $1,000 in premium. So it really depends on the size of your club and what you're looking for. We might have some alternatives if that's something that you're interested in terms of adding on to the league's excess liability policy, which then you share that limit with the league and anyone else who's insured. That's something that the league has opened up to its club members and is very, very unique, because most organizations who put something like this together really keep that limit reserved for their organization. So that's a huge benefit of the league. So if you're interested in the excess coverage, I do recommend that you shoot Renee or I an email. We're just reading through this here. Some of them I think were regarding premium, and we did.
And I don't know if we mentioned it, but these slides will be up as well as a recording. Take a look at League e-news as well as our blog for a recap of all of this. We'll see if tonight tops tomorrow night's webinar. We'll pick the best one.
So I think we have just one more question here, Kevin, that we're able to answer here. There's a couple of them that we may need to follow up individually offline because we need additional information in order to answer the question.
Yeah.
What are the guidelines in terms of what crashes should be reported to American Specialty? It's a really good question. We definitely recommend anytime there's a very serious crash or fatality to report that right away to us. We also ask that you report any incident where you think medical expenses could be incurred, because again, this policy, the excess accident medical policy, can be used to help offset those out-of-pocket expenses for your club members. There's not a downside to over-reporting. We won't open an actual claim until the injured party sends in the information that we need to open a claim. So there's really not, other than the administrative work on your side, a downside to reporting those. And the incident report form is available on the insurance purchasing website. Mm-hmm. So with that, I think we have wrapped up our portion of the webinar, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. Big round of applause for the team over at American Specialty. Again, if you have any questions at all, league or membership-wise, send them to me, Kevin. Insurance, send to Renee. But we're just so thankful to have such a strong partnership with American Specialty Insurance. Like Gina said, we've been working together for over 25 years, and yeah, just it's really fantastic. Thank you. And I invite all of you to come to the National Bike Summit and meet our American Specialty All-Stars in person first week of March. If you feel like you could get more out of this webinar by joining us again tomorrow night, or if you have any feedback for me, let me know. We are doing this again tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Talk soon.